And hello everyone, Carlos here for another weekly internet chat. What's up with Archaeology, 28th of March 2017. Um, Today we're going to talk about some parts of evolution, basically the evolution of our brain. I've been seeing some movement and chatter in Twitter and on YouTube, some debates on what drove the evolution of our brain to what we got here. So I'm going to set up, first of all, we're going to do a little bit of comparative archaeology, right? Comparative archaeology is a tool that archaeologists use to try to interpret the data which they obtain from excavations. I'm going to share a screen in a little bit, but first of all, I'll try and make this as interesting as possible. So I'm going to do it almost like telling you a story. I have all the links to the source material in my description, all of them. And I also have one that I could find that goes against the actual science. It's towards the end. We'll discuss it, but first let's do a bit of time travel. We are going to go back in time to about 3 million years, 4 million years ago, and we had on Earth many hominid species and hominin species. There were basically three distinct groups. There were the Paranthropus and the Australopithecines. The Australopithecines, we can compare them to what they were higher apes, so they belong to our primate species, the ape class. Now, let me just get this bit working. I always forget, not that I don't know, I just sometimes always forget the nomenclature of all from the kingdom of Animalia down to the what we are, which are the subspecies of Homo sapiens. So sorry about that, wrong. We have quite a fast internet connection, so it won't be too much. Right. We belong to the order of the primates, the suborder of the Haplorhini, the family of Hominidia, and we are the genus of Homo. Now, going back 3-4 million years ago, our family was not our genus was not Homo. We evolved. The Homo genus evolved from most likely the Australopithecines, and I'm going to share the screen now. Look at an example of what I mean. This is Lucy. This is Australopithecine afarensis. The skeleton of a female was discovered by the Leakeys, the family Leakey in Kenya. So they excavated this hominin in Kenya, and they dated it to 3.2, 3.6 million years ago. This species, Australopithecus afarensis, was an omnivore. It means that it didn't just eat plants, it also scavenged for meat. I'll put it better this way. I think it's better this way. We know that she ate meat. Oops, sorry about that. Wrong. That went ahead of myself. We know that because of her teeth, and oh god damn it, can't stop this shit. Sorry about that. Get back to showing it this way, much better. Because of her teeth, this is her skeleton, her cranium. You can see by the teeth that she was a meat eater because of the front teeth and the molars, and also the incisors. We've done a comparative archaeology where we got this skull, which compares brain size to Pan troglodytes. And who is Pan troglodytes? Well, did you ask? Pan troglodytes is the chimpanzee, the common chimpanzee, right? They also eat meat. And they are more inquisitive, more, you can also say more intelligent, because they plan ahead. They actually strategize, hunt. They actively hunt. Compared to the gorillas, which are exclusively herbivores, the gorillas are much more peaceful, even though the silverback can attack. But basically, the method of defense is to show off. So they beat their chests, and they use sticks and throws things just to make a big ruckus, big sound. That's how they defend themselves against attackers. The Pan troglodytes, or the chimpanzee, he is a very crafty fellow. He is very strong for his size, but he also eats meat. He actually hunts small monkeys, which are also from the primate family, also primates, but the hunt the monkeys that the chimpanzees eat either fruitivorous or herbivores. They eat fruit or just plants in general. And which are the collemines, a few of the species that I can't remember the species, but it's not important. They eat meat. Yeah, I saw you guys. I think you guys know where I'm getting at. This is a sort of a response, trying to make it as scientific as possible to the question that was raised by Bering, Kraut, and the two vegans that they debated about our human brain got here by meat. Of course it did. Now, first of all, we cannot compete. We cannot compare what the requirements for our brains now to the requirements for the brains when we were evolving. I have an article here. It sort of answers it. I'll read it, and then I'll discuss it as I go along. Now, it says how human brains evolved with meat. It basically said if we poke around raw vegan corners in the internet for long enough, you'll almost certainly come across the idea that humans aren't evolutionary designs to eat meat. The theory is that since humans and other primates evolved from a common ancestor, which is correct, then humans, like other primates, are primarily designed to eat plants. No. I'll explain why I say no. Our teeth are not designed. We'll start first with our teeth. Our teeth are not designed to just eat plants. In fact, because of our incisors at the front and the premolars and the front teeth, which are designed to rip, the incisors are designed to cut, and the molars and premolars are designed to chew. Now, plant-eating animals, because plants are basically cellulose, they require a much more broader chewing method to chew it much more before you ingest it to get any sustenance out of, because cellulose is extremely low in nutritional value. Fruit is better, much better. It's easier to chew and easier to digest because it's has the vitamins, minerals, etc. But it doesn't have protein. And what we have now with the food that we eat today is all basically domesticated, from the animals to the plants. We cannot compare an apple today to an apple even 1,000 years ago. The apples 1,000 years ago would have been, if the Americans and, well, the crab apples. That's how apples were before the domestication and genetically modification got them to the size they are now, and the range that we have now, from Granny Smiths to Golden Delicious, etc. There's so many to choose from. The apples that our ancestors would have seen, say in Europe, once they came here, they would have been the size of cherries, and they would only be edible basically towards the end of winter, early spring, once the cold icing, the freezing of the, what do you call it? Jesus. Of the dropping temperature, which would have made the frost. Thank you. That's it. The frost would have made the apples slightly easier to eat. They would have been tart as fuck. But that's how an example of what an apple would have been then to now. If vegans, even the paleo, quote unquote, paleo diet is a load of bullshit, because you are eating genetically modified food. Yes, agriculture, since it was first developed 8,000 years ago, is genetically modifying an organism. So we just do it faster now instead of generations, which would have taken to produce the cattle that we have now, that came from the aurochs, at the shoulders would have been 2 meters tall and weighed a hell of a lot. And now we have cattle which are tame as fuck and basically are small, and you can even have micro cattle and sheep and etc. So you can see that you can't compare what was then to what is now. Let's continue on. The primates, there are primates, as it mentioned here, that actually eat meat, yes. The pan troglodytes, bonobos, God, I can't remember its subname, its species name. But anyway, the bonobos, chimpanzees, they eat meat. There are other primates that also eat meat. For example, some insectivorous to some extent, and so on. But the ones that I mentioned, the chimpanzees and the bonobos, are the main primates other than us that are omnivorous, that they do eat meat actively and a lot. There's humans. It says here, there's overwhelming evidence that humans evolved as omnivores. Another clue is that our pancreas and our appendix in ruminant animals and animals that eat a lot of plant material, their appendix is much bigger, much prominent, because that is where in mammals specifically herbivorous mammals, is used to digest the cellulose. It was packed with bacteria. You would have taken a hell of a long time to break down the cellulose into sugars and bases, etc. Basically into sugars and carbohydrates. So that's why cows have 4 stomachs, ruminants have 4 stomachs, they have to chew the cud, etc. Rabbits have huge, compared to their stomachs, huge appendices, and etc. You can see what I'm going at. Now, meat is meat. Now we can go into this is what I said. Their brain needs about 20% of the person's calorific intake, and especially some specific nutrients like omega-3 fats, vitamin B, etc., etc. We can start now our journey from then to now. All these articles are in my description, so I'm going to show my avatar. Sorry about that. I was trying to prepare a bit better, but there isn't that much good photographs and pictures to present. So, and I need to get a better talking type avatar like you guys have, many of them have. Now let's start our journey. About 5 million years ago, when Australopithecines africanus in the southern Africa and in the northeast Africa, where Kenya, etc., is the Afarensis, they were living alongside many other species of hominids, like I said, Paranthropus bosei, which was had a I'll show you. No, he was basically just like the gorilla. You can imagine our first ancestors was the chimpanzee. I'm not saying it was. I'm just saying imagine chimpanzee-like. More or less the same brain capacity, more or less the same weight, but our common ancestors, our ancestor then would have been bipedal. He would have stood upright like we do now, instead of like the chimpanzees do. Same with the bosei, who would be comparable, this is comparative archaeologists, to the gorillas. They would have been, they were taller, much broader, and they were basically eating just plants, while the Australopithecines were mixing their diet from scavenging the remains of kills to gathering plants, fruits, insects, etc. Now, our brain size at that time was about 300 cc's, more or less, about the same size as the modern chimpanzees today. I'm not saying that they were and that we evolved from them. No, we didn't evolve from them. We evolved from a common ancestor, all of us, about 7, 8, or 10 million years ago. So there's no mistaking about that. Now, because we were our Australopithecines were consuming meat, they would have gotten a slight more advantages, because not just meat, they were getting more of the marrow of the bone, which is much more nutritious than the actual meat. In fact, they would have had some meat, because carnivorous animals like the cats and the hyenas and the dogs, etc., couldn't get all of the meat. The hyenas, in fact, were the most efficient of the carnivorous animals, because they would have chewed the bones and eaten everything. So our Australopithecine afarensis or africanus would have been mainly around looking for carcasses that were killed by cats. Big cats, lions, tigers, etc. Not lions, tigers, Jesus, I'm sorry. Lions, leopards, cheetahs, etc. They always leave some scraps of meat on the bone, etc., and they wouldn't crush the bone to extract the marrow. The smaller ones, yes, but the bigger ones, no. So, as that would have been a common occurrence over time, the brain of the Australopithecines that were consuming the meat, because they were getting much more energy, they would have followed a behavioral pattern similar to what the chimpanzees are doing now, chimpanzees and bonobos. They would have been naturally getting, their brains would have evolving faster and growing to account for the interactions of social interactions, planning, etc. Now, let's skip ahead to Homo, our first of our direct ancestors. Currently, it's Homo habilis, but that could change. So stay tuned. I will describe that when they do settle it or not. Excuse me. Now, by that time, Homo habilis, is known to have produced tools. Specifically, he modified a stone, pebble, or just a stone where he chipped away 2 or 3 bits of that stone to make a crude cutting edge. That wouldn't have been to just would have been used, that cutting edge, very rudimentary, would have been used to scrape as much of the meat as possible, and also to crack open the bones to extract more of the marrow instead of just hitting it on the ground, which possibly the Australopithecines would have been doing. Homo species, or Homo habilis, would have been actively breaking the bone, taking it back to base camp, quote unquote, Patrie, wherever they protected themselves from being, because they were prey. Remember that they were prey to the big cats, etc. So they would have had to taken it back as a little risk exposure as possible. Now they could have crushed it at the leisure, the bones, to extract more of the marrow, and that reinforcing the intake of calories. And not just calories, essential fats and vitamins that can only be really gotten from then, not now, then, 2.5 million years ago, by eating meat. You could not get vitamin Bs and certain fats from plants because there was no quinoa in Africa, there was no maize in Africa, there was no beans in Africa. They are all American plants, native to the Americas, South America, in fact. In the Eurasian, African continents, you'd have had tubers, fruits, which, like I explained, the crab apple, the apple, and a few others, and basically grasses, lots of grasses, lots of plants like that. So we can't compare, I reiterate, we can't compare what was done, what was eaten 2.5 million years ago, 2 million years ago, 1 million years ago, 20,000 years ago, to what is eaten now. Now, back to Homo habilis. He would have extracted the marrow, so his brain would have continued to evolve and become grow. He would have also changed over time to adapt to the changing environment, etc., etc. And we may have now we could get to Homo erectus, how most he is our most direct ancestor, Homo erectus. I've already talked about him, the marathon man. He was built to run, built to actively hunt, and at the start he would not have been able to cook his meat, which I'll explain in a little bit, or cook his food, which I'll explain as I go on. But for now, he would have still had to chew the raw meat. And I have an article here which explains how the next phase would have accelerated because we were cutting the meat instead of just chewing it off. What is it? We were cutting the meat instead of just chewing it directly, which is very inefficient. In fact, our teeth, as this article explains, is how sliced meat drove evolution. It starts off, like I said, the tedious part of the chimpanzee's life and other primate cousins, that they spend hours gnashing fruits and occasional carcasses, etc. And which is all made possible the same type of teeth and the large jaws of our early ancestors, Australopithecine afarensis, Australopithecine bosio, Australopithecine africanus, not bosio, but Australopithecines. They have the same type of teeth. Even our teeth and jaws are smaller. So why are they smaller? It shows that the stone tools that we developed from Homo erectus would have driven our brain, because the stone tools would have helped us slice meat and pound root vegetables, which is what I was just saying. And it would have reduced the time and force needed to chew, because as you chew, you're expending energy, and the energy that you expend chewing could be used to our brains. In fact, that, like I said, like an article just said, that we use up to 20 or more % of our calorific intake just to drive our brain. And our brain is not a muscle, it's an organ. You'd think, oh, our muscles would require more, but no. Our brain is the organ in our body that requires more energy to keep it going, etc. So, it says about modern humans, we spend so little time chewing, we eat much of the high quality diet than our ancestors, which we do. Our ancestors, even our species, Homo sapiens sapiens, before agriculture, would have had a more varied diet. Now we're getting to the more varied diet that they had, but we have a higher quality because of agriculture. Now in the 20th century, not even in the 15th century did we have the same quality of food that we enjoy now, and they were both agricultural societies. So whereas chimpanzees survive mostly from fruit, they do, yes, humans eat foods that are packed with more nutrients and energy into smaller portion sizes, namely meat. That's the whole crux of the question of why humans eat meat. You could eat vegan, yes, but to get the same amount of nutrients from vegetables and fruit, you would need to eat more of it over more time than the same amount of meat. Meat is like nitro, an analogy, nitro on for a car engine. You add that, it just gets that much concentrated more energy. This guy, Daniel Lieberman, is an evolutionary anthropologist from Harvard University, and the studies have said, whereas chimpanzees survive mostly, chimps eat some meat too, of course, in the form of hunted monkeys, but it's not the dietary staple in the way humans, including hunter-gatherers. Today, cooking helps us make meat even easier to eat and digest. That came later. Homo erectus, 1.6 to about 900,000 years ago, 1.6 million to about 900,000 years ago, were not cooking their meat. They were eating raw meat. They would have used, of course, stone tools to make it easier to chew, but he was still, as this study shows, the study, you can look it up by Daniel Lieberman. It shows that it's the actual study. This is just a reporting, obviously. And he goes on to show that, hominins, not hominids, hominins, which is us, were regularly eating meat as far back as 2.5 million years ago. Lucy and Homo habilis. But cooking didn't come into about commonplace until about 500,000 years ago. Last week or the week before, I produced evidence that it's been pushed back to close to 900,000 years ago, 700,000 in Spain, in Cantabria, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, I have to go there because it's a really awesome place. So our brains with Homo erectus at that point were about 800 cc's, 600 to 800 cubic centimeters in volume. Ours is 1.3, 1,300, 1,200 more or less cubic centimeters. Homo sapiens neanderthalensis were 1.3 to 1.4 cubic centimeters, 1,000 cubic centimeters. So it's more than a liter and almost a liter and a half of brain volume. Ours is a liter and 300, more or less. Average. Some is more, some is less, but it's an average. The Homo erectus about that time, maybe Homo erectus in Asia, definitely, but in Africa and in Europe, it would have been then Homo heidelbergensis. Maybe I'm saying maybe because they're still trying to establish if it was different species or a variation of the same species, Homo erectus and Homo heidelbergensis, but they are our direct ancestors, and they were beginning then to cook their food, not just meat, but cooking actually vegetables as well, and that the cooking itself doesn't just provide an easier way to digest and to chew. It also releases some other properties of the food. Cooked meat, apart from being much more digestible than raw meat, it also produces sugars directly, so they're easily absorbed. That is also another thing that makes our brain get more energy, so it can evolve into a greater size as it is now. We have reached the limit of our brain capacity because of the pelvis. The female pelvis cannot get any bigger because of our head. So we have reached the limit that we know of. But because of cesarean sections, who knows? Who knows? If a cesarean section becomes more prevalent, our evolution could go that way, and our brains could become bigger. But that's just speculating. It could not, probably not true. So yeah. Now, what do vegans argue? Vegans basically argue that now we don't need meat. Fine, we don't. We could use supplements and all that sense. But there's a video was produced, a video produced by Wizard of Cause, which basically says everything. I've put the link in the description. I forgot to put that one. Put a link on what the scientific method is, because pseudoscientists, idiots who just get studies, or even not even studies, get articles like this, and basically spout bullshit without actually producing facts. And I'll show you what I mean about producing facts, not producing facts. Where is it? Where is it? Here you go. Most likely, what's his name? The guy that debated Bering was going on to this article. Just so I've got it in the description to show you that I provide mostly what balanced view, but this is not a balanced view. This is a total pseudoscience. Sciences. It starts off comparing commodity, basically disparaging. Eating meat is wrong, but I'm a great meat eater. William Shakespeare, Twelfth Night by Sir Andrew, etc. The dialogue with Shakespeare famously poked fun as he considered foolery. So a meat eater is foolery, is fool. That's not scientific at all. This guy, Chris Stringer, from the National Paleoanthropologist Chris Stringer. This is how they're getting quote mining. He was interviewed by Colbert. There is a thing called expansive tissue hypothesis that says we evolved from our large brain by changing our diets. Yes, we did. Our ancestors had a great big guts because they were vegetarians. No, they weren't, because I just showed you that our ancestors were like the chimpanzee, were comparable to the chimpanzees, not comparable to the gorillas, which were the other branch of those hominids, the Paranthropus bosei, etc., etc. There were many. There were more than just that. I just provided one example. And it says here that they never had enough spare energy because their guts were using 20% of their energy. No, they were not. If you eat certain plants, gorillas don't use 20% of their energy in their guts because it's using a bacteria to break down the cellulose. It's done in the appendix. It's not an active chewing like the cattle, the ruminants do. And our stomach is not, or our guts are not actively breaking it down. It's a bacterial breakdown. So I don't know if you said that because I didn't watch this, but that's what happens when you start eating meat. It's much more concentrated sort of food. Yes, it frees up energy, and we would start to run a bigger brain. No, we wouldn't start to run a bigger brain. It would take a long time for it to evolve. And Stephen, the joke, that's why vegetarianism seems stupid to me. Ha ha ha. Whatever. He said that this use challenges the evidence that meat, when eaten raw or cooked, was brain food for our ancestors. No, it doesn't. It was brain food for our ancestors. The fossil record shows a clear correlation between the appearance of hominin meat eating about 2 million years ago. Go back a bit. Go back to a few million years before that, as evidenced by stone tools, uncut marked bones. Our ancestors, what I just said, were eating meat before they had any way of actually cutting the meat. They were breaking the bones, etc. So that is wrong. I've just proven by studies, which are in my description, to refute this. Study now goes on to studies in genetics and primatology have had more support that meat helped. Yes, it did enable our ancestors to obtain much needed nutrients to develop our extra neurons. Yes, that's happening now with the chimpanzees and the bonobos in comparison to the gorillas and the gibbons and the orangutans, which just are primarily vegetarians. However, meat eating may have played a role. The argument exposed often by writers, paleo and Atkins enthusiasts, is disparaging that meat lovers of all kinds of often flawed by the nutritional standpoint. I've shown you guys that what we produce now for our consumption is absolutely nothing what they were eating in the world back then. So this argument is mute. The problem is, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Of course, it doesn't make a lot of sense because they can't think back and into our what it is to eat a bandana leaf. I don't know what plants are in any forests, but try eating try getting as much nutrition out of an oak leaf and see where it gets to you. That's what basically what the primates in all over the world are eating. If they're not eating actually poisonous plants, especially in the rainforests of the Americas, the smaller the monkeys, they eat actually poisoned plants that produce poison to ward off attacks. So which then they'd have to eat clay as the medicine and shit. Now it says that neurons run on glucose, not meat. Okay, but where do the glucose comes from? Plants, from the cellulose material that needs to be broken down by bacteria before it becomes into sugars, then it's absorbed by our intestines and then is absorbed by the brain, or meat, which is easier to digest, so you don't need as much bacteria. Our stomachs can do, our stomach acids can do, convert it into sugars, and there you go. It's a power pack. They don't run on protein or fat. Fat and proteins in our stomachs, and not just ours, the primates, bonobos, gorillas, bonobos and chimpanzees, they also convert the meats and fats into sugars. That's why you have the reaction of ATP, ADP in our cellular, in our cells, especially in the what's it called? The factory of the cells that actually produces the energy to run the cells. Glucose is converted into ATP and ADP and energy, and that's what drives all cells. So the glucose must be received from the bloodstream 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even while you're asleep, correct? That's glucose of about 86 billion neurons, more than any primate by comparison. Gorilla contains whatever, I don't know where the fuck he gets this. The neuron, there's brain size. Our brain size 86 billion neurons compared to 33 billion for the chimpanzee, and only gorillas 33, 28 chimpanzees. No, he's got it wrong. It's the opposite. Chimpanzees have a bigger brain than the gorillas. So see, this statement here is wrong, and I can actually prove it because let me see, where is it? Gorilla, Wikipedia. Sometimes it's a good source. Let's have a look at the brain capacity. Gorillas are considered highly intelligent, yes, but I want to look at, let's see, the brain capacity. Where is it? God, sometimes, like I said, sometimes Wikipedia is cool, sometimes it is not. Physical classifications. Let's see. While gorillas are 0.8, he weighs 230 kilograms. Where's his brain? Where's his brain? God, it hasn't got his brain size. Let's search for it. And let's see if he's correct or not. Gorilla's brain capacity. It is. Here you go. Compared to the primate cellular scaling, gorillas and orangutan brains. We're getting direct source from the the U.S. National Library of Medicine Health Institute. It's a study. So what does the study say? Their brains are about 1/3 the size of human brains. We know that. The actual comparison. Oh, look where he got it. He got it from here. The human brain has 86 billion non-neutron cells. And so we found out where we got that number. Of us, anyway. Can't find the gorilla size. Come on, it should be easy to find. Let's look at the table one sometimes. Oh, come on. What the fuck? Oh, here we go. Determining the mass number of cells in each brain cortex. I'm assuming This would be mass in primates. Number of neurons, 109 billion. That's European billion. Mass BR. I honestly don't know the what. Honestly, can't say I know what it is because I don't. I don't know how to read these figures. The gorilla and the orangutan cerebella is a sample size of the weighing. It weighs 37.6 grams, holding 29.3 billion cells. Now, what did he say? He said 33 billion. So, the orangutan's 28 billion cells for the orangutan. So, he got it wrong. While chimpanzees, see if it's in the other one from Wikipedia. Sometimes they don't. What is it? Anatomy and physiology. Here we go. Anatomy, brain size. Here we go. Brain size. See, between 282 and 300 cubic centimeters. Doesn't say how many. With the combined, here's a thing. That's the testicles. Sorry about that. It's bigger. The chimpanzee's brain is bigger and has more neurons than a gorilla. So this is wrong. Chimpanzees get more, have a bigger brain because they have more. Oh, he's right. No, gorillas contain everything. Have more neurons than the orangutan, than the gorilla, because they eat meat. He continues on, chair of anthropology, who recently named a few American associations. Arguing by authority. I'm not arguing by authority, by the way. I'm arguing by facts. I'm just presenting the facts, and I proved them before using. It's all in the. It's all in my description. All the data that I used, all the studies, all the articles, etc. And he believes that the hominin more than broad niche than meat per se. If it wasn't for meat, we would have still been like gorillas. So this article is wrong because it grew. Instead of pan troglodytes, have here Homo Australopithecine afarensis to Homo sapiens because we ate meat. And then because it even grew even faster when we developed cutting tools and then fire. That's what it is. Now let's address what the vegans who want to protect the animals. You cannot morally eat the animals. Yes, you can. It has nothing to do with morality. It has everything to do with how we naturally are. We are an omnivorous species. Our biology is geared up to eat both meat and vegetables. So it has absolutely nothing to do with morality at all. You can have the morality, but the morality again is subjective, as Bering seen what's proved. While if you do stop eating animals and start producing enough plant material to feed the whole 7 billion of us, 7,000 million humans. First of all, the domesticated animals, they are so dependent on us because we have bred them that way that they would go extinct very, very rapidly. You can see that by For example, that here in evidence from domesticated animals that are going extinct. There are a couple of breeds of horses in Europe, and one of them is the two of them are from the Iberian Peninsula. They can only survive. They can't survive in the wild in Europe, but they have survived in the wild in the Americas once they were released by the conquistadors because they had so they found the niche, but they went wild. The horses here in Europe, because they don't have the same conditions to expand as they did in the Americas, which then became pests, by the way. They would not have survived as many of the species wouldn't survive. The horse species, some would, like the Brumbies in Australia, which they run wild and etc. But in Australia, it doesn't have any predators, so there's no problems there. In America, the Americas, the horses in North America do have the wolf and the coyote, but the wolf and the coyote evolved to hunt animals that they were in conjunction with them, like the deers and antelopes that are native to America, etc. You introduce a foreign species into a habitat, it'll explode. It'll ruin it. That's one thing. So they are not very environmentally friendly. If they just release all the domesticated animals, most of them will die. Some won't. The pig is one example. The pig will revert to its wild state very, very fast. So will the cat. Dogs, not as much. Many of the breeds of dogs have been bred into such a way that they will die. Even some cats as well. Tabbies, no, and so on, and they can survive if ferally. So there are very few species that will survive, domesticated species which will survive in the wild. I'm just regurgitating what Wizard of Course said in his video, so I won't go too far into that. But another thing that to feed the 7 billion people vegan, you need to plant a lot of food. Yes, you can try and grow it hydroponically, but not everything can grow hydroponically. The grasses, you can't grow it hydroponically, for example. Grasses and certain other plants like that produce oils and that, you have to actually put them in dirt and get a lot of sun. And to do that, you need to cut down forests, etc. Well, most breeds of domesticated animals like the cow, sheep, etc., you just need grass. North America is one of the, even South America and Australia, and the Russian steppes, Eurasia, has steppes that were naturally there, which fed the herds, the vast amounts of herds during the glacial max, the Pleistocene. So while humans were evolving in Europe, there were herds of ruminants, from bisons to elephants to rhinos to deer, etc., that outnumbered by a long way all the domesticated animals, cows and etc., that I used to feed us. And that's another point that should be taken into account. Again, like I said, it's not morally wrong to eat because it has moral nothing to do with it. It's biologically, and if they can prove that we don't need that we can digest without processing of plant food, and again without like they take supplements and all that. The supplements are produced by the petrochemical industry, for example. And if you try to extract them from any living organism, many of the essential amino acids, etc., have to come from animals. So they're not getting it right. And that's about it on my little ranty thing. Sort of gone on for an hour, I think. It's my point of view, and not my point of view, no. What I talked about at the start of this hangout, is the evidence that shows that our brain evolved because of meat eating. It's irrefutable. But they cannot compare the food that we consume now to the food that was consumed while we were evolving. If they try to, their argument goes out the window, because you can't. If you do that, if you really want to become paleo vegans, they will not be allowed to eat anything that agriculture has produced. And in this day and age, it won't make you very healthy. So they will need to eat more than their body weight a day of plant material to just get the same amount of energy as a shank of a small animal would do, or a rabbit, for example. So that's about it. I'm not going to link this to Bering or to Crowd or to the other two vegan idiots, because I don't give a crap about them. I won't. The vegans, I won't argue with them. I don't engage people who mix with who use pseudoscience. I don't tolerate. I'm too old to tolerate idiots. So they can insult me. They can fucking do whatever they want. I'm too old to even care. So gonna end it now. Sorry if I made this boring as fuck. The other thing, I'm waiting for a special video which I'm trying to organize, but it's a bit difficult. And if I can't get it, I'll do it next week myself. I know enough of the knowledge to try and present it. So guys, thanks for coming on. Thanks for supporting me. And I do apologize for being a ranch's old cunt. You guys are awesome, and I respect you all. You've earned my respect because you are tolerating my dumbness. Dumbness in many things. I'm dumb. I'm not the most intelligent person in the world. But I wish I could communicate better. Like I said before, I engage better if I'm answering questions and so on, because then I have something to my brain works better that way. So okay guys, thank you, and see you next week maybe. Who knows? Bye guys.